A $57,000 note deal landed in my inbox last week. It had a good yield, recently renovated property, and a performing borrower. My due diligence framework killed it in 5 minutes flat, before I even considered submitting an offer. Here's how it cuts through the sales pitch. This was a real deal that I analyzed recently. I'm going to keep the specifics of it anonymous, but the seller pitched it perfectly. An investor had just renovated the property, and the borrower was making on-time monthly payments. The yield looked very attractive for the risk level. On paper, this checked a lot of boxes, but I've learned that paper and reality don't always match. I use a systematic approach for every deal. It takes less than 30 minutes, often much less, to determine whether I should bother looking further into a deal or throw it in the junk bin. Today, I'll show you how it worked on this specific case. First thing I looked at was the state, and that checked out. It was a state I was comfortable investing in. The initial numbers review looked good. It had a good yield and a nice unpaid principal balance. But once I got to the assessment of the underlying collateral, the actual property, and my value analysis of that property, these were when I started to see the red flags. And then on top of that was the borrower profile, which really threw up some warning signs. I didn't even make it onto the tax status or onto the documentation steps of the framework. So those first two steps looked fine, but really once I hit step 3, that's where things started to fall apart. The first red flag was the neighborhood. On my assessment of the neighborhood, simply looking at Google Street View, I started to see that the neighborhood had a lot of poorly maintained properties that were not in very good shape. Just 5 minutes cruising up and down the streets on Google Street View told me everything that I needed to know. There were houses that had roofs that looked like they were caving in, paint that was peeling off of the siding, and rusted cars sitting in the front yard like permanent lawn decorations. This certainly wasn't a neighborhood that looked like it could support the property values that the listing claimed the property was worth. One of the key points of the listing was that there were recent renovations. And that's great. So someone spent the money fixing up a house, but that doesn't help when the rest of the neighborhood is in decline. That's not really a good asset in my books. That seems like more of a liability. Then in the fourth step, I started looking at the value analysis. This is looking at the loan to value and investment to value calculations. And this is where my Notion template automatically flags deals that exceed my risk thresholds. By the numbers, the UPB, or unpaid principal balance, was $55,000. The property was supposedly worth $57,000. That puts it at a 96.5% loan to value ratio. My system automatically flags anything above 80% LTV for review. Why is that? Well, because the borrower has essentially zero skin in the game. They're close to being upside down from day one. A small market dip means that they would actually be underwater. And when people have no equity, they walk away pretty quickly when life gets complicated. Just look at the 2008 financial crisis if you need some more examples. Also, there's a reason that banks use 80% as their standard loan to value ratio for most mortgages. It decreases the risk in a default scenario for the lender significantly. I already knew that this deal was on life support, but by the time I got to step 5, which is the borrower profile, that's what really sealed this deal as a pass. This loan was originated back in May of 2025. We're talking barely dry ink on a performing loan. Think about this scenario. An investor renovates a property, immediately seller finances it, then sells the note within months. In this scenario, it looks like this property was fixed up by an investor, sold on seller finance terms, and then the note was immediately sold to cash out. While we do sometimes see this in the note industry, often in these cases, there's going to be a much larger down payment to provide some cushion and some safety net for investors who might want to come in and buy these fresh and unseasoned notes. This felt more like someone who was trying to get out fast, maybe because the neighborhood didn't quite match their investment criteria. When I started looking around for neighborhood comps, not just the optimistic valuations, I realized the property was probably worth more like $35,000 to $40,000 max. So in this case, I'd be paying $57,000 for a note that's secured by a property that's maybe $35,000? That didn't seem like a very good idea to me. That seemed like wishful thinking. This is the power of having a systematic approach. Framework didn't just help me quickly rule out a deal, but it helps me not even get emotionally invested in anything that's not going to work out. I developed this system so that I could be consistent and make sure that I'm making investment decisions based off of sound fundamentals in math rather than emotions. And now my system kills bad deals before they waste any of my time or tempt me with any fake opportunities. The framework caught this in under 5 minutes for this deal and ruled it out. Without a solid framework, it'd be easy to spend hours analyzing a deal that's fundamentally flawed. That's not just expensive, it's inefficient. I've linked my complete 7-point framework below, also including the Notion template that I use that automatically flags high-risk deals like this one. As physicians, we don't have time for lengthy due diligence on every single deal, but we can't afford to skip it either. Systematic beats random every time. Having a system that can help you rule out deals that don't fit your criteria quickly will help you to find the ones that you should be spending the time on, because those are most likely your legitimate investment opportunities. And there, it does make sense to spend more time going deeper into the proper due diligence. So what red flags have you learned to watch for? Share them in the comments. Let's help each other avoid these expensive mistakes.